All right. Welcome, everybody, to the seventh annual uh, Workplace Horror Stories. Believe it or not, it's been 7 years that we've been doing this. And this is one of the funnest events that we do here at Apprentice Worldwide. Well, one of the scariest because we share stories. People with a lot of experience here share stories about their lives. And some of these stories are horrendous, but the purpose of this is to learn our lessons, right? So that you guys, the associates, particularly, can learn that it can get scary, but that we can survive together, right? And we've survived because we're here. So the lessons that we all share is out of the goodness of our hearts to make sure that you know that you can make it, right? We made it, so you can make it. So we're gonna start with some quick intros. Everybody, if you can introduce yourself, put yourself on the camera when you do so. That'd be nice. What do you do? Who you are? How long have you been here? Something fun about you, and if you want to go on and share your story, go right ahead. Okay. So I'll start with the one I know the longest here, which has to be Ignacio. So go ahead, brother.
Hey guys, good afternoon. So I've been, as Hernan mentioned, we've known each other for a little while since college. We also was there from the beginning with Apprentice as well. So pretty happy to been participating here for 7 years and almost 10 years for Apprentice overall. So I am a board member and do participate in mentoring and events quite a bit. My day gig is I work at Ryder. I head up the data governance group at Ryder, and I've got a lot of horror stories. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Well, not necessarily from
Not at Ryder. No, Ryder's fantastic.
right.
So
That's the best place in the world. Awesome. All right. Believe it or not, Stephanie is the one that I know the longest after Ignacio. So, and because I like Stephanie a lot, she goes first.
Thank you. Stephanie Palmer. I do not know how many years we've known each other, but it's been some time. You kind of helped me through my career. So it's been a minute. French Canadian. I've joined Apprentice about a year and a half ago. I'm based out of Miami. And yeah, I mean, mother of two. I'm not sure there's anything much exciting other than my banking career. I'm opening up a private school, an international private school. So that would probably be my fun fact. But very excited to hear all these horror stories. I don't necessarily have one for today, but I'll definitely start thinking of mine for next year. Thank you, Ednan.
Where's your school, Stephanie?
It will be Miami based.
Okay.
Is it the swim school?
No, well, the swim school is going to be part two. We already have a small swim academy, but it's an international school. We're inspired by the Finnish program and also doing English, French, and Spanish as a core curriculum and German as an optional fourth language.
very nice.
Phenomenal. Well, I'm going to hear more about that in our Christmas party, hopefully.
Sounds good.
Well, in Palaban. Are you going to Palaban or no?
I may go for a day, but no, I may go on Sunday.
So Saturday, ITFA, which is an association that I chair, we have a cocktail there. So you're more than welcome to show up. We have 52 people registered.
Oh, that's lovely. Well, send me the details and maybe I can make it.
Okay. Awesome. All right. I think Mike Babbitt, the Mexican guy, who's not really Mexican.
No, not really Mexican, but I like to call a lot of Mexican friends. So we just had a Dia de los Muertos party here at our house last weekend, and so we had, even though it's a little bit early, it was still a fun thing to do. But I lead international trade for a southeast-based bank called Synovus. Happy to be here and happy to share stories. Hernan and I have known each other for A good minute anyway, and I lead the North America efforts here at Apprentice. So
Excellent. And you do have a few horror stories.
I do.
All right. I think in order, well, Andy, since he's showing his nice shoes.
How's everybody doing? My name is Andy Newton. I am the Director of Acquisitions here at Property Force. And I've known Hernan for a little bit over 3 years now. And just happy to help and support. And I definitely have some horror stories to share. I got some new ones from last year. So it's always interesting times.
Awesome. All right. Mr. Law.
Hey, sorry, I can't have my camera on. I'm actually driving right now to my church group. But I'm Stephen Law. I do branding and graphics, but I also have done a lot of coaching, teaching, and pastoring. So done a lot of different things, whether it's being on stage or off stage. That's kind of been my world. And now I get to help other people get on stages, which is nice. So when it comes to Apprentice Worldwide, man, I don't know, Hanan, if it's been, I think, has it been almost 2 years already? I think it's been about almost 2 years, maybe a year and a half that I've been involved and try to help the people that are in the Tampa region. So that's the people that I'll be close to. And that's kind of my situation right now.
Excellent. Thanks for joining. But I'm going to hear a little bit more in a bit. All right. Who else do we have? Sebastian Linares.
Hernan, hey everyone. Good to meet
Dímelo,
you all.
macho.
I don't have any horror stories. Well, to introduce myself, my name is Sebastian. I study business at Virginia Tech, and I also minor in finance. My major is entrepreneurship, innovation, and technology. It's kind of like a merge between engineering and business. So it's kind of nice. And I'm looking forward to see all the horror stories in the workspace that I'm probably gonna have in the future. Hopefully
Sí,
not.
señor. Excellent. All right. My my pink glass friend, pink glasses friend. ¿Qué pasa, mija?
What's up? Hi,
What's
everybody.
going on?
Nice to meet you. My name is Idalmis Carrasco. I'm a business coach. Been working for 25 years in the healthcare industry. I love it, but I love more now to be a business coach. So I'm here to help. I've been with this beautiful program concept. Wonderful Hernan created this Apprentice Worldwide with the Women Leaders Network for almost 6 years now. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
How are
By
you,
the
Hernan?
way, if you are a woman leader and you are not in Idalmis group, please make sure you contact me so that I can give you her info. You should be there. There's over 100 women, all apprentice team members that are helping each other a little bit more because, you know, we help each other. But that one is a little extra special because Idalmis is in charge. She brings the pink power that I cannot bring. Well, I can bring it because I have 2 girls, but you know.
2 girls and your wife. 3.
I do.
3 women in your life.
But I do mentor a lot of amazing women leaders as well. That's why we created that extra space.
Thank you,
Okay.
Hernan.
And then who else are we missing? I think that's it. So how about you can't see me that well, so I guess Iggy, you want to kick it up while I put another mask?
I don't remember. I've told so many horror stories. I don't remember which one I haven't told. So I'm kind of going through my ideas here. Sorry.
All right. So who wants to kick it off?
I can tell you guys something that happened to me in my corporate world. So one day I was traveling to Jamaica to work over there. I used to work for 22 countries in Caribbean, but you know how it is that 80% of the sales are coming from just 5 islands. So, but I was in Jamaica, and I was with this representative, uh, pharmaceutical representative in this area. I don't know if you have been in Jamaica, but one of the cities is a Spanish town. So we went there. We went to visit one of our most important doctors in that area, and we were surrounded about like 7 guys around the car. And we were just women, both of us, inside of the car. We were like very scared. Even that she's from Jamaica, she was scared. So you guys imagine if they ask me for my computer, my passport, what happened, right? So I think it's horrible in terms of you're so scared being a country that is not your country. They have a different dialect as well, so sometimes they're talking to each other with not even just the accent is like so hard to understand. Imagine with another language internally. So thank God nothing happened, but I immediately went back to the office and talked to the headquarters and said this girl cannot be working in this area. So, they they brought one of the guys to work in that specific region. So, but that's one of the most scary situations that I face in my 25 years in the industry. Was very scary. But I want to, share that. But I think it's important that not everything is bad, but in that moment, when you are facing those type of situations, it's like very scary, and you don't know what is going to happen to you. So
Yeah. So big lesson to learn, particularly if you are a making decisions. Make sure that you have if that you have safety first. No, take care of your employees. Make sure that they're safe. That you have the right people. Sometimes we put the wrong culture to manage another culture as well, and it happens. It's funny. One of the stories that a friend of mine tells me is Brazilian bosses that are managing Latin America from Brazil, managing in Argentina, Chile, and other areas are not acceptable unless they live in Miami, which is kind of interesting. No? How we are in Miami, we're a neutralizer, even for cultures that are somewhat different. But it's important that you don't put I guess a Brazilian boss to handle an Argentinian or an Argentinian to handle anybody. No, I'm kidding. All right. Who's next? Who's got a bad boss story? Got any bad bosses stories?
Yeah, I got one. So,
All right.
I thought that I knew what narcissism was until I worked for this person. And it was pretty interesting. So basically it was like constantly feeding the ego. And there was at one point where if you received some sort of benefit at the office, you almost didn't want it. Whether it was a reward, a bonus, because every time you got something, it felt like you were Keanu Reeves and you were dealing with Al Pacino in that movie, The Devil's Advocate. Like there was always going to be a much more significant price to pay on the back end. And the thing that I learned was that it's pretty crazy, like how far some folks will allow their ego to take them, to the point where like we'd get messages in meetings and we thought we were being pranked because the message in the meeting was exactly what happened the day before, and it was referenced as, this is an example of poor leadership. And we'd be like, well, that's exactly what just happened yesterday. So just like weird psychological games with people, all kinds of things like that. Unfortunately, the person is no longer a part of the organization. But I would say this was probably the most extreme example of narcissism I'd seen in my entire life.
Did that person get fired? Because if not, I should have fired them. Fired.
Yeah, yeah, they got let go. Fortunately, I mean, it was a big win to the point. Speaking of here's how much of a narcissist. So after their termination, they asked someone here to do a straw poll of who stood up for them after they were terminated, so they could make a list of people that were now enemies. I couldn't believe it. I was like, this is insane.
That's crazy.
Well, so I fire people. Well, by the way, apprentice has nothing to do with this guy. By the way, it's just in case, a disclaimer. But speaking of, speaking of, have you had any crazy co-workers? Anybody want to share a co-worker? Mike,
Yeah, I've got one.
Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
so I've had a couple situations where a coworker wanted our boss's job and basically created a toxic environment around that because of different things they'd done. When I was at a global bank, I was building capacity models, and I won't say that this coworker of mine who were working on a project together, I won't say he intentionally sabotaged the project to make the boss look bad, but it was when the boss came under fire for something that was behind schedule in this thing we were working on together. He basically explained to the people who were criticizing how it really wasn't managed appropriately and how he could have done a better job if he'd been given our boss's job. Just very kind of unprofessional type stuff like that. And yeah, just that was one example. And then another example, when I was working at a different regional bank, there was a reorganization, and my coworker didn't get the promotion that he thought he should have had, and anyway, left in a big mess, right? Left in a kind of a dramatic fashion. And as they were kind of cleaning out his office, they found the letter that he'd written to our new boss, explaining why he should have gotten the role that he didn't get. And it definitely soured anybody's perception of him as a person, and burned any kind of bridge he might have had there. So definitely drama.
No, we don't. We've never had a story in none of our places of somebody that wants to sabotage somebody else's activity. No, we've never had that at all.
Never. I got one for you. I had 2 sales reps, and we used to play sports on the televisions for people who came in on the weekends, pretty much let them watch whatever they want, just to make the environment fun on a Saturday morning. And the rule was whoever got there first would get to control the remote control. The person who got there second decided they wanted to watch their favorite soccer team that weekend. The person who was there first was like, well, I don't watch soccer, so the rules. I was here first, so I get to pick what we watch. Showed up on Monday morning, and HR pulls me to the side. They said, hey, who was running the floor this weekend? And I said, well, I was running the sales floor this weekend. It was my week. They said, well, we found marijuana on one of your sales reps, like at their desk. And I said, there's no way. Because the person, like, as drug-free as it gets. I said, and it just hit me. I said, something, because the guy, we already thought he was a psychopath. So we were like, I said, pull the footage from the floor, pull the cameras. And sure enough, you see the dispute over the remote control. And then I was like, fast forward till her lunch, and then fast forward to the end of her shift. We fast forwarded. He left for the day, came back in, and planted a couple of joints at her desk. And then when we tracked the phone number, it was his phone number that called HR and reported the next day, all over remote control and a soccer game.
Wow.
Thank God we had the cameras, because she was done. Thank God we had the cameras.
crazy things that people do to
And this
sabotage.
was a big company. Like this wasn't like some like run. This is like a huge company.
Yeah, yeah. We've never seen any backstabbings at work either. No, never, nothing like that. Those stories, you're making them up, Andy. You're making them up. Sorry, I forgot to
I got a
introduce.
story I can share
Yeah, yeah.
real quick, just because I'm about to have to go in just a couple minutes. So imagine a boss that basically has no social life and no good relationships outside of work. Even their marriage relationship seems non-existent, even though she's married. So her only way of finding any type of social interaction is through working, therefore making her a social workaholic. This boss has the desire to work, I'd say 22/7, so not 24/7. So she gets about 2 hours of sleep. So much so that she's been in the hospital multiple times for overworking and continues to do so. So then she expects the rest of the staff to work her hours. At one point, I was even told, no, I'm Eastern time. This place happens to be in Mountain time. My hours were set from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. So I was like, it's a early start to the day, but I can get a lot of stuff done fast. Well, they're like, it doesn't seem like it's working well because we haven't been able to come up with all the things that we need to have done until really after our lunchtime, which then that's 3 o'clock my time is their lunchtime. So we'd like you to be available until 6 o'clock Mountain time every day, just in case something happens. I'm like, so you want me to work from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m.? Yeah, that's not going to happen. And basically it turned into this whole, well, everyone's working hard and everyone's working 60 plus hours a week. So that's just what we do as a company. And I'm like, that's just bad leadership. There are ways around that. And that's not how you want to have a company. So it was a very interesting situation and took a lot of moments of me educating them how to do leadership when I'm not the one in leadership. But I've never been one that's afraid to say stuff like that. So yeah. Don't use work as your social life. It's not the best option.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I've come across a lot of bosses that are like that. When I was a young guy, that wanted us to work, 8 to 8, 8 to 9. And I wasn't even in investment banking where it was expected, but it was just like kind of like the norm. So I get you. And nowadays, that's a big no, unless you want HR in your face the next day,
Right.
Yeah, I'll end it with this part. Speaking of HR, I actually asked for a meeting with our HR manager. And just to add into the horror stories, I said, hey, I'd like to have a meeting about this because it's been really, really rough. And she said, okay, I scheduled a meeting with me, you, and the other two bosses, supervisors that I was having issues with for tomorrow. I'm like, that's not how HR works. Like we're supposed to talk about this first and then come up with a plan. So yeah, that was a fun workplace. So, but I do have to go. I wish I could join you guys for more of these stories, and I hope you guys continue to survive through the horrors that we sometimes face and grow stronger and wiser through them all.
Thank you, brother. And we'll be surviving and helping each other survive. So we're here for each other. Thank you. And speaking about survival, Maureen,
Hello.
how are you?
I'm good. I joined a little late. So nice
No,
to see
just
everybody here.
double up. Introduce yourself and go to your story.
Sure. My stories. So I'm Maureen Bonfante, and I'm currently working at Standard Chartered Bank. And I'm here to also facilitate networking some of our young people with mentors and services and so forth. So work in progress, work in progress. I think this is a fantastic organization. My horror stories, one I'm going to call Devil's Wears Prada because I worked at Fox Cable Networks for literally 4 months. I was the credit and collections manager. The person that was the director of the area was quite frankly and simply a racist. I had Filipino lady, someone from Puerto Rico, an African American guy, and I won't get into the specifics. But it was really unfortunate that this woman would take opportunities to jab and speak poorly of these team members when she was behind closed doors with me, almost since maybe after 2 weeks. And I couldn't take the work environment. I was actually training up, because the more somebody tells me somebody is not trainable, and I see that they're good people, they're decent people, they're hardworking people. I made one-to-one time with the team. There are about 6 people. One woman, I trained her on Excel because I was told that she could not learn Excel. Those people. And I think because I'm Latina, but I'm light skinned and my last name's Italian from my father's side, that some people don't, like maybe I don't know what she thought when she was talking to me. If she thought I was going to be like, yeah, you're right, those people, those guys. So in the 4 months that I was there, I spent a lot of time training, mentoring, and coaching the people on my team because she neglected them. She pretty much only gave her attention to the only guy who was not of a minority group in the team. When she saw me doing one-to-one training and coaching of the staff, she actually made my life more miserable by dumping more and more work on me, finding excuses to complain. Something silly like, oh, you didn't file this on time, like a little nonsense thing. I'm not hired to be an administrative person. She made the environment so toxic that she got to a point where she was micromanaging my emails, just making things really difficult. So fortunately, I found another opportunity. But what I wanted to share was when I left, and they gave me the exit interview. I was actually keeping things on a little post-it, because when you work in a toxic work environment and you're new, it's kind of hard, like, who do I talk to, especially a company like Fox Cable Networks, like, where am I going to go? And I gave an extensive detail of how she treated my team members, things she said, some things I won't even repeat. And she was on contract, so they couldn't let her go right away. But I think after 6 months or something, I heard that she left. I'm glad that I did the one-to-one coaching and support of the people on my team. Some of them went on to better opportunities. And I even told them when I left that I would give them, letters of reference and wishing them well. But it's sad, like, knock on wood, that was like the only really bad experience I had with a boss, where she was like so blatant. Like, she didn't even disguise it. She was just like, the door's closed. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm in her office, the door's closed. There's no recording here. Like, it's my word against hers. She's in the company like a long time. So who's gonna side with me? So that's my heart.
And I think that brings up an important point, and something we talk about. I think every time we have these events, is that sometimes you just cannot fix the environment. I mean, there comes a point, and I think two things are really hard, at least for me, in corporate America, is that your work environment is highly dependent on your boss, right? So you can work in the best office or the best company in the best role, but if your boss is somebody you just cannot work with, there's kind of no way around it. And if you're new to the company, it's very hard to move, right? Most companies won't let you move within a year. Some companies have, more extensive requirements, but sometimes you just cannot change the environment. Sometimes the environment changes, right? Sometimes you have a really good boss in a really good company, and then suddenly you get a really bad boss in a good company. And I guess the moral of the story is sometimes you just cannot change the environment. The only thing you could do is change how you react to it, which is then sometimes leaving.
Yeah, that's a good point. We can't
For your
always
health.
Yeah, for your mental health. And
Right,
also, like I said, use the exit interview, to share what happened, and hopefully that will alert them to prevent it from happening to somebody else.
Right. I've had a couple of those situations where it's like you realize after a while you're like, this is never going to change. And I will tell you, like, from personal, and this is very personal, but I think sometimes the difference between, being in a place where you don't get along with your direct boss and unfortunately getting let go is timing, right? Like if you have a moment, if you're just not clicking, or you're in an environment like you described where it's just you're not fitting their corporate culture, be it a bad corporate culture, you got to leave. And I think that's something that's really important. Like you got to do it for yourself, but if you're not getting along with your boss, that's not going to last very long,
Good
right?
point.
Even if it's not your fault, right? So sorry,
Yeah.
it's got a little bit of a downer, but I think it's important to mention. Sometimes for the younger group on the phone,
Yeah,
sometimes it's not super obvious. Like your boss will dictate your future.
Really?
On more than one, yeah, on more than one occasion, I remember applying for jobs, and somebody who I was trying to leave their group will know you're applying and reach out to that person and say, hey, this person is not fit for that role.
Wow.
When and that's a very common practice in corporate America, right?
Yeah.
Until you realize, hey, the culture is not right. It's not me, it's just the culture is not right, or the culture is not right for me, right? So you got to figure out which one of those two it is. So
Yeah.
that's my
Well,
PSA for the day.
but nobody has a racist boss here I've ever had, by the way. I don't think so. Everybody has wonderful, amazing bosses that are loving and caring and want to give you a hug every time.
I would share some stories, but I not even on this call I could share what I've heard people tell me in large companies in Miami. Not my current company.
By the way, these are the things that will not be shared in recording.
Yeah.
But since the person that I work for passed away and the bank is no longer around, I can share these stories. Woo! So I used to go as an analyst. I was 22 years old in this bank called Hamilton Bank. I'll share it because the bank is no longer around. I used to go as an analyst, and the guy was a Cuban guy, very very known in the community for shady things that he did. He would go into the analyst group, so a bunch of 20, 21-year-old people that were starting in business, and his way of mentoring people would be to walk in unexpectedly and open the door of the analyst's war room and say, hey you, Ignacio. And the guy's name was Ignacio, actually. What have you been doing here? You've been calling Argentina, Brazil. You just spent $3,000 in phone calls. Are you stupid? What are you doing? And then he goes to the other guy next door. Hey, you, Francisco, you $10 in calls. You don't call anybody. What do you do here? What do you do here? I'm like, okay. And that's his and by the way, he was serious about it. It wasn't a joke, but we were like, what kind of zoo did I get myself into? I was an analyst at that time. I presented a credit in the board meeting, and this one of my dear friends and bosses, the guy had the audacity to say to her, hey, have you not gotten any lately?
Oh my God.
Yes, that happened in front of me and in front of the board. Of course, we both left in within a couple of months after that. The lady was a good friend of mine, still is. Still works in banking and in credit, but that happened, and that happened to me. I was 22 years old. The other thing is that a lot of the executives were not all of them, but a few of them were sleeping with the secretaries, and this was not a hidden thing. Like it was like you could tell that they were not trying to hide it. So imagine that experience at 21, 22. And when you get the some of the worst nightmare situations when you start, it's a good thing and a bad thing. A good thing, I always try to see the good thing is that I stay away from people like that and have stayed away from people like that all my life. And it saved my career many times whenever I spot people like that, and I don't accept things like that. And I am an advocate for respecting women, and I am an advocate for all these things, and it stemmed from that horrendous situation, and it happened, but I wanted to share that with you. Sandra, another old friend of mine. Well, she's not old, but she's been a long time friend of mine.
She's on mute.
You're on mute.
Oh
You're
yeah.
on
Oh
mute.
hi. I do have one horror story. So
By the
I
way,
worked.
none of the women have ever been harassed at all. None of
Oh
them.
no. Oh yeah.
No, ever.
Oh wait. So
None
I
of you.
live in, of course, Florida,
None of you.
Orlando, and I
Everybody's
always
the
have to
same.
wear a cardigan every day. Well, now I work from home, but I always had to wear a cardigan every day. Why? Because guys have to look at your boobs. Why? I don't know why. That's annoying. And all the girls know that here. I'm like, why? They have to like stare at, like, it's like guys just got out of a jail and never seen a pair of boobs. I'm like, why? Why? So I would have to wear a cardigan every day to work when I worked in an office. And it was very annoying because I live in Florida and it's freaking hot. But it was always like, why? No matter how old, it could be older, really old, younger, directors, VPs. It was really annoying. So anyway, that's not the horror story. Well, that was a horror story, but there's another horror story. Another horror story was one time I had 2 blood clots in my legs, and then my doctor's like, "Hey, was working in marketing." So my doctor's like, "Hey, you should try to tell your manager to work from home a little bit because you can't." It was my right leg. I couldn't really drive, and it hurt to walk. And you shouldn't be sitting down all the time because if you sit down a lot, you could also get another blood clot. And 100,000 people die every year from blood clots. And I was on blood thinners. So anyway, I went to my manager. He's like, "Oh, I don't know." He literally explained it because he didn't comprehend what a blood clot was. He goes, no, we can't do that for you. You have to go to HR. And then I went to HR. And then they're like, "Oh, you have to get," I got all the paperwork from my doctor. And I had brought hospital paperwork to my manager and to the HR. And then they made me get more paperwork. And then at the end, HR is like, "Well, no, your manager has to approve it." And she's like, but my manager said no. You made me do the FMLA paperwork. And they're like, "No." They went back to my manager, who is the director, creative director, and our VP. And I said, "Hey, here's my paperwork from the hospital. Here's the FMLA." And they're like, "Well, you got us in trouble with HR by going to HR." I'm like, "You told me to go to HR." And they're like, "No, if we do this for you, then we have to do that for everybody." I'm like, "Well, I don't see anybody else here with a blood clot." And again, 100,000 people die from blood clots. I could get another blood clot and I could die. They're like, "No, we can't do that for you." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I went back to my desk and I wrote up an email and I said, "Okay, for a conversation, I understand you don't want to give me this accommodation, allow me to work a couple of days from home, but you guys are taking on the liability. If anything happens to me, as I told you, 100,000 people die and I could get another blood clot. So you guys are taking on the liability." And then I copied HR. Then the next day they allowed me to work from home only 2 days a week, and only for like I think only 6 weeks or 2 months, but I had the blood clot for 5 months. But it was like, you have to fight with these people, and it was ridiculous. You have to fight with people when you have a medical condition that's critical and you could die from. And literally, it was really hard for me to walk and even drive, but didn't care.
I think it's good your how you approached it in the end. It's like, hey, in the end of the day, I told you I have this medical condition.
Yeah.
You're not making the accommodation. I just want to put you on notice. Something happens to me, you're responsible for not making that accommodation.
Yeah. So at the end, yeah, that's what
Crazy.
you have to, like anybody that's young and on the put it in
Yeah.
writing, because I think that's when you put something in writing and you're saying, hey, then you take on that liability, then I think it has more strength to it than if you just, oh, we had this conversation. They could always say, you never asked for that, Sandra. You know,
Mhm.
so then, but if you have it in writing and you said no to my accommodation after I showed you, and I did put in there, you know, I provided my FMLA, I provided my records from my hospital. So I documented all that in there. So
Well,
just be an advocate for yourself, I guess.
what I like about it is what I like about your story, well, horrible story, by the way. But what I like about your story is it showcases some gray areas as well, that are based on people that have not been trained to do their job as a manager. Sometimes managers get thrown in. They don't know. They might know how to deal with their particular, like if you're a medical sales, right? You know the medical terms and all that. But when it comes to HR or technology or any other area, you need to be trained. And unfortunately, training is the last thing that happens in these institutions. Like people say that they train you, but it's like to check a box. But people really don't have time.
Yeah.
Don't have
But
time
even HR said no, which I'm like,
No.
HR should be educated on this.
Yeah.
And this was again $1 million. You know, it's a timeshare company though, Sheraton, Westin, and Hyatt. So it's a huge $1 million company, and even HR should have known. You know, if this dinky director or the VP didn't have the knowledge, but the HR should have known enough to be like, hey, this is a liability for the company. They didn't care.
Yeah, sometimes
Okay,
people
so
need to do the research before they respond too, which I
Yeah.
think a lot of people don't. You know, it doesn't matter if you're a small company or a large company. You're still in, you know, governed by the same law, and I think some managers don't. They don't get it.
That they don't. And if
I mean,
and
it's
I
not
did
worth
do, yeah.
it's not worth the risk. I mean, it's all water under the bridge now after COVID. But so many companies were so resistant to letting people work from home now for any reason, and it's such a blessing in disguise when COVID happened that all these things are now like a moot point. But there's still companies out there, unfortunately, that still they're people
yeah,
that are not well versed. They're not doing their homework. But anybody on this call that's a resource manager, and somebody comes to you with these type of questions, you need to do your research. Like, be human, but also
Yeah.
understand the law. Like, be human first. I would say
Yeah.
that's an important thing, right? Like, do your part to help somebody.
Yeah.
You know,
Like
that's
if,
part of
if
being a
somebody
manager.
brings, yeah, they bring medical document with them. I understand like everybody would love to work from home, but if you bring documents from home, and literally I brought in like, this is what a block plot is, because I'm sure not everybody knows, but it still didn't work. So yeah,
yeah.
just be your own advocate.
Be your own advocate. I like that. I like that. Be your own advocate. It's like manage your own career. Manage your own
Yeah.
career, because your bosses might not be that interested in managing your career. Although you might have phenomenal mentors like us, not everybody cares about helping you rise or your life be better.
Yeah.
And
Got
sometimes it's a blessing in disguise, right? So you realize the heart of a company with little things like that. Like it's such a small accommodation, and they didn't do it. Like
Yeah.
that's the kind of stuff. Sometimes
Yeah.
it shows the heart and the culture of the company is not employee focused, which is
It
terrible.
wasn't great. And then I did try to change to another department, and that manager told the manager not to hire me. And then I went to the manager and I'm like, why? What happened? I'm like, I have all the,
Yeah.
20 years of hospitality. She's like, no, your director told me not to hire you because they don't have time to be replacing people. She just told me to my face. Director told me not to hire you because they don't have time to be rehiring people for that
Which
department.
bad all around. Horrible.
So
Bad
yes, I
all
did a
around.
bleeding.
Horrible and bad all around. By the way, Arthur's the last man standing. Arthur, my favorite Miami Russian. You there?
Hello, guys. I
¿Qué
can't really
pasa?
talk, but I listen to you.
It's okay. Sounds like everybody in my life. Awesome. Listen, um, before we leave, I want you guys to give some pointed advice. So here's some advice that I'm gonna give you guys before I leave. The first thing is remember that your agenda is not necessarily everybody else's agenda. And I'll be careful, particularly when you're starting in your career. When you graduate college, when you start a business, it's tough. But when you're working with other people, remember that your agenda is not everybody's agenda. So what you're trying to do, right, is before you start making a ton of mistakes and having, dealing with people that have their own agenda, is to understand that this is going to happen to you and make sure that you scope the work environment and start getting allies that understand your ideas and that believe in who you are. Start making friends. So some of the things that we do here at Apprentice are going to help you out. So remember, your agenda is not their agenda. So horrible things will happen to you. It's a fact. If you don't get people to align to build relationships, um, they're gonna happen anyway. But at least you can avoid more when you get along with people and are not a jerk. The other advice that I would give you is do not fall in love with the brands. So I have had tremendous experiences with banks. I work mostly in banks and brands. Uh, that you just fall in love blindly with the brand and you want to work in that brand because it's your dream scenario to work in X, and then all of a sudden you get to X and you said, what the heck is this? In my case, I worked in a place that had a little horse and carriage, and the horse and carriage, the horse shit on me and the carriage ran me over many times. And I fell in love with the carriage, but I am a masochist. I worked there twice, and it's just. And then I worked at another place with a little flag, and that place was pretty damn good. And you think it's very similar, the same, totally different cultures, right? So those are my two cents. So anybody else that wants to share some advice before we leave?
I
I know
like your
that.
advice about the networking thing, because it doesn't even matter when you start your career, right? I'm later in my career, but there's still challenges. And one of the things that I'm learning, because now I'm in banking and I'm new to banking, is we need to find those relationships, because your boss, for any number of reasons, may not be the one who's going to break the ice or connect you with the right people. So you kind of have to, at some point, talk to people at the water cooler or in the coffee room and get to know people and go to events, and you market yourself, because if you don't do it, no one else is going to do it.
Great job. And that'll save you some horrendous, painful times at work. Sí,
Yeah.
Hidalgis, ¿qué tú crees?
¿Qué?
I'm
¿Qué
sure
de
you
qué?
worked. Everything was perfect in your career. Phenomenal. Nobody
Yeah, 25 years of love.
of love, pure love.
No, I think that when I moved from Puerto Rico to Illinois and living in the Midwest was very hard, because not everybody accept people from the Caribbean immediately. It's hard in different aspects from your side, that you are moving from a country, culture, weather, leaving behind all your family and friends, and different language, a lot of stuff. But I have even a nurse that was asking me, oh, what she was telling me, a lot of people to have the job that you have, like indirectly. And I give her my card with my name so she can give it to the doctor that I was waiting outside. And she looked at my card and said, oh, you have an MBA, like kind of doubting. And I say, no, I have two MBAs. So it was kind of hard sometimes to kind of get into it, the centers and doctors and hospitals and all that stuff, because it's completely a different ball game from Puerto Rico, right? But at the same time, 5 years later, like everybody was like I was in a good position because I earned the respect, and also I was doing good results, for the region. But it's hard. It's hard, and it's a matter of how strong you are, how you can face reality with grace. Be sure that you believe in yourself. Be prepared. Um, I had a interview today for a podcast, and the topic was about surviving and have your evolution in the corporate world. And for me, like after so many years as a woman, Latin, I'm very petite also as well. So all that stuff, sometimes you don't think that it's gonna matter, but matters. Sometimes you are in a headquarters in Texas with a lot of guys that are very tall, and I'm the only woman. Things like that are hard to understand. But it's like how big how prepared you are for your for your role. So I was not intimidated. I knew that it's gonna be different. They're gonna see me, different. But at the end of the day, I have the same information that they have, and I exceed, expectations. So it's okay. We have to face the reality.
Right.
Well, what I it means, and I know you're a powerful leader, right? But sometimes it's good that these people experience you, right? Because the reality is people won't learn unless they are willing to uh, give an opening to people that are different, and they realize that they eat just like you, drink just like you, have good feelings like you. But they always look at the differences. No, they have to see the commonalities.
Yeah.
And that only comes when you are present, available, and when you're not scared. That's another thing, right? If you're scared, uh, it's always going to be the same. But if you are, confident, and you are a good person with a good attitude, I'm sure people will come around. I've seen a lot of people come around, and obviously I've had the same situation working for U.S. banks. Being Latin, sometimes it might seem a little different, but I've had
Mhm.
some of my best times, believe it or not, in
Yeah,
Birmingham, Alabama, and and Kansas, and I drink bourbon a lot, so in Kentucky, and I've had a phenomenal time, and I've seen the
for sure.
change. I've seen the change. It
The
much better.
impact. The
Yeah,
impact that you can create in those companies because you are different and you are doing a great job. So,
Yeah.
like it's incredible. But
it's not
And,
for every bad story. There's 100 better ones, good ones.
and I think Hernan, sometimes it's a catch-22, right? Like the piece that makes you unique can sometimes make you stick out, right? Like I think sometimes, if
Mhm.
you blend too much into the group, like you blend too much to the culture, it doesn't make you unique. And my name is Ignacio, right? So imagine, like, I remember, like, one of the hardest cultural changes I had is when I started my MBA at University of Florida. And this is 30 years ago, right? There was 4 Latin people in the class out of 110. Every single person remembered my name after the first day,
Yeah.
which is because they didn't know how to pronounce it. So they asked me, "Hey, how do you pronounce that? I've never met anybody called Ignacio." But that made me unique, right? But
Yeah.
the second part of that is you gotta figure out if that uniqueness is gonna make you excel, right? So
Mhm.
you gotta, and one thing I always tell people when they're interviewing is, if you have the ability to meet your coworkers, or you have the ability, now that we're all many of us are remote, it's hard to understand the corporate culture. If you have the ability to visit the office and meet with your coworkers, the one of the best things you could do is go to lunch with somebody, right? Like if you're going to meet with somebody and say, hey, I'm going to be there for a full day interview. Any way I can go to lunch with some of the team members? I just want to get to meet them. Know your coworkers, right? Because if you're uncomfortable with them at lunch, you're going to be uncomfortable with them at work. There's no way around it, right? So there's your coworker, there's your boss. Those two groups are going to make a big difference in your career, right? Like everything could be beautiful, but if you don't get along with them for any specific reason and your uniqueness isn't going to be a benefit to you where you are, you don't have to take the job. Like that's one of the things that you can do, right? If you have a good background, if you got a good, educational background, you don't have to take that job if you have different options. So keep that into your, that's part of your control, right? You can interview with people and you could say, hey, I'd love to meet some of the coworkers. You don't have to be pushy. You say, I'm really interested in the culture. Haven't read a lot about the team online. I would love to meet some of my team members. And by the way, that's a red flag when you don't interview with somebody from the team. That's usually because they don't want you to meet them.
Yeah.
So that's also to me a red flag. So I think that's some of the stuff. Like if you meet with the team members and you understand the culture, a lot of these things, go away and you can add, we are an apprentice, right? We know people in a lot of different companies. If you see somebody an apprentice that's worked in that company, ask them, hey, what do you think of ABC Corp, right? Is ABC Corp somewhere that I'd feel comfortable working? Is it somewhere where I would excel? Would I be a unique asset? Would I be blend into the crowd? Will I would I not work? So ask, do your research. Don't chase money instead of culture, because culture will beat you.
By the way, since you didn't bring a mask or a costume, but you made up for it with good advice. Thank you. So Sebastian or Arthur, by the way, this is the beauty of what we do at Apprentice, right? This is a sample of 100 and some mentors that are always loving and caring and available sometimes, not every time, but they're available to have these discussions with people like you, Sebastian, or Arthur. So we're everybody here, when I asked them if they wanted to help young professionals succeed, everybody signed up and said yes, right? Everybody. If not, they wouldn't be here. They would have not shared. So that goes to show you that people care, and that when you feel alone and you go through stories like ours, that you can always pick up the phone and talk to some of your mentors. Okay, but what question do you have for us? Have you had any bad stories you want to share? Maybe we can help you. Tú, Sebastián, tú? Talking to you?
Yo? Well, no. No, for now.
Everything perfect.
Yeah.
I think one good example is Hernan, and I know you and I have done this a couple of times, is there's been members in our group here who have been in an opportunity, had multiple opportunities and say, hey, which one of these opportunities should I take? And I think that's a good opportunity to reach out to somebody either in that industry or somebody that works in that company ideally, or in that, area. Like reach out to them and ask. Like get another set of advice. Like people will, these are, people in apprentice care, man. Like I think that's a big part of it is, everything else could go right for you, but sometimes you need to just bounce it off. Hey, I got these two opportunities. I remember having a conversation with somebody probably like 3 years ago, and they were looking at 3 different companies in New York, and we're like, well, those are great, but you should consider this one for these reasons. And he wasn't going to make that decision. We talked to him, and the guy's super happy where he's at. And it was funny because he had to move to New York, and then he ended up being able to move back to Miami. And that was the biggest thing against it. Like they really liked him, and because they really liked him, they let him move back to Miami, work for the Miami office, and that made a humongous difference for him.
With the New York salary.
With the New York salary, which was nice.
That's a good move.
But when you start with a New York salary, it's a lot, moving to Miami, but the reverse doesn't work that well for you.
No,
and that was one of the things we talked about.
that's right. Well, listen, I know it's 7 o'clock. I want to be respectful of people's time. Anybody want to share anything? So, again, if you don't know the people here at Apprentice, Mike, Iggy, Maureen, Idalmi, Sandra have been mentors for a while. You can always reach out to us, right? You have to be respectful of our time. We will,
Yeah.
but eventually we will answer. But most importantly, so you know what's happening at Apprentice Worldwide. So next year is our 10th anniversary.
Amazing.
Can you imagine that? 10th anniversary. And we are going to have a conference in Miami.
Yay.
So we are going to party like it's 1999. So start planning. We're going to have a day of fun, a day of learning, and a day of relaxing. Networking, a day of networking, a day of relaxing, and a day of learning. Just so you know, okay? So just be on the lookout for that.
Sebastian has his hands up. Is that your little hand up there?
Oh, Sebastian, dale.
Yeah, I do have a question. So, I don't know what to do in regards of my education and my career because we applied to various startups. I'm running a startup with other co-founders, and we apply for incubators slash accelerators. And I'm currently in college right now, and if we do get accepted to one of those, which would be amazing, honestly, it would require me to drop out or just leave for a semester. So
I took breaks in my education for different reasons. I would say be prepared, like have a schedule, have a plan. You know, like I took 2 semesters off at different times. It's going to extend your, obviously, when you're going to get your degree, but you kind of have to think about what classes you may be missing, because you know when you have that continuous education, you're always up to date. Your brain's kind of like in the groove of what you're learning. I would just say try to keep current. You know, if you knew you were going to take I don't know, economics next semester and you're going to miss it, try to just do some self-study. So when you jump back in, things are still fresh in your mind. That's my only advice. But I would also say that once upon a time, degrees were not as necessary for many of the roles that we have today, going back a long, long time ago. So my opinion is if you're able to, as a young person, to start your own business and be an entrepreneur, and you have the skill set to do that, and then try to find a way to pursue your education in parallel with that.
A lot of universities will do a gap year too. So just talk to your university about possibly doing a gap year. And a lot of universities appreciate gap years because it makes you a more well-rounded person. So they'll basically hold your spot in your progress for a year or however long it happens to be. So
Yeah. By the way, if you want to discuss this in greater detail, Maureen and Mike are the people you need to talk to. So Maureen is our head of mentoring, and she schedules the mentors for our apprentices and associates. Okay. So if you don't know somebody, you have a question, you can always come to me, but now Maureen is doing that for us. So she navigates the network for us. And then Mike is basically, well, Mike is the head of North America, and his role, like mine, is to make sure that you guys are, most importantly, that you guys are alive and well, right? That you know that you're not alone, that we're here for you, that we together as an organization, we find a way to help you out. And sometimes you might not need a mentor, you might need some coaching, or you might need, which is extended, or you might need some sort of training, or you might need to be hooked up with an opportunity here and there, or with an investor, let's say, things like that. And we can talk about those things. Okay. So Iranis is a coach as well, for example. And what a coach does, as you know, is they have programs that accompany you beyond just giving you advice. No, they follow up with you on a continuous basis. And so we have 20, 24, 25 coaches that give up that are mentors, that give up their time. They charge for a living for what they do, but they can come in and give some good advice, or 2 or 3 sessions as well, as needed. And by the way, our program doesn't end when you finish college. It actually, most of the people that we have start after college and have been with us for years. Okay. So my advice is, I always look at opportunities. They rarely come when you want them. I always like to analyze things, because you know, if you're making a decision without doing any type of analysis, then that's wrong. But when you analyze your situation, your state of mind, your heart, your passions, your financial situation, your family situation, and then it's never gonna be perfect. You're always gonna be scared when you make a decision. But sometimes when these opportunities come, you gotta grab them, right? Like I went through something similar just recently, right? I was in a nice, cushy, type of easy job, and this guy came out of left field and made me a wonderful offer that I was scared. But this is like, I don't have any more time to waste. This is my life. I either do it now, or when am I going to do it? When another opportunity like that appears, which might never happen. So, but that's me. Some people, they wait for the second time or third time because their situation doesn't allow them to do that. Right? So, what do you think, Hidalgo?
No, for sure. I think that when we are in Sebastian's shoes, it's hard sometimes to see the light at the end of the tunnel, you know. But it's beautiful that we are all here together. Probably not even a quarter of all the people that you have, Hernan, in this group. But I think it's important that you express yourself, that you communicate what is your plan, or if you don't even have a plan, just sit down with someone and then kind of get a planning structure, and be sure that you are following what is your next step. It's convenient for you to be holding two things at the same time, be a sidepreneur, like a kind of looking forward to entrepreneurship. But for me, I'm coming from the old school in terms of education. And Marine, I agree with you. Sometimes we don't need the whole degree. We need a lot of preparation, certifications, be updated. But at the same time, I'm more into the finish something, because you never know your future, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you don't have anything right now yet complete. So complete something. It's my son
Yeah.
studying UCF. He studied biology, and it's great, but for me it's not enough. For me as a mother, even that he graduated from UCF, and when he was doing the internship, he got an offer, and he had been working in the same place for 3 years in physical therapy and rehabilitation. So that's good for him because he's getting experience, but he graduated. If something happened tomorrow in that job, he can go to school and then start being a teacher of biology.
Mm-hmm.
But also he
Yeah.
has something. So you have different alternative for your future. So my recommendation, like Marine, do both at the same time, because you never
Yeah.
know what is gonna fail. So you have the backup always.
Yeah, and good schools have good networks, right? And I think that's the important part. Like, and I'm going to use the example. So I used to, in my previous job, I worked a lot with private equity, and one of the firms downtown, one of the best private equity firms downtown, is EIM, right? And these guys, like, they would put together private equity groups based on the school that they went to school at. Like they were Northeastern guys, or they were Mid Atlantic guys, or they were West Coast guys, and that network, that's how they put together an executive team to basically go buy out a company. And that's it. When you go to a good school, that's a good network, right? But they're not going to bring you into that fold unless you graduate,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's a network in itself, right? And that network, having that in your degree, you never know where it's going to come up, right? Even doing your credit approval, they're going to ask you if you have a college degree, right? They're going to ask you where you graduated from. If you're going to, let's say, you're kicking ass, and they're like, hey, we want you to be a COO of this new startup. They're going to say, but do you have a college degree, right? Because you gotta show that to the investors, and that stuff, it's like a certificate on the investor profile. Like, if you don't graduate, I think, to Maureen's point, like, if you're going to take an opportunity, you're going to take a semester off, make sure you have a plan to finish. Because I can tell you for a fact that when they look at companies and they see the executive team doesn't have a college degree or doesn't have an advanced degree, they take into account, like, you're not going to be a CFO unless you have a CPA degree, right? Like, or unless you're for, especially for a large company, unless you have a degree from a large institution, a Ivy League institution. So those things do matter. Like, they do matter, and they open up your network, and especially for large institutions or company, colleges with a pedigree. It matters. Like, you want to have that. You want to have access to that network, and that network doesn't open up unless you have a college degree. So if you're going to take the chance, just make sure you have a plan to finish it, because it does matter. And it matters at the worst time, right? Like, at the point where you go through first stage of funding, and you go to second stage of funding, and now suddenly there's a private equity group out of the West Coast, and they're like, wait a minute, this is the guy who's going to be leading that department, but he doesn't have a college degree. They will consider it. Yeah. Like, that might be the one thing that they're like holding back about. So if you're going to take that chance, just make sure you have a plan to finish it. That would be my advice.
Good advice. I need to jump, but thank you.
You're welcome, Sebastian.
Yeah, thank you for the advice.
I know this it started a little horrendous and horrible, but you see how there's light at the end of the tunnel when you hang out with a good team of people, and that, I guess, that's how we'll end. I'm so happy that I have you as my friends, and that we're doing this together. So it makes life a little better, right? When you're hanging out with good people. True. And pretty damn intelligent people too, by the way. Guys, I love you.
Thank you, everyone.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Enjoy. Thank you.
See ya.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.